Welcome into the EMA Online podcast. Mason Foth, Alec Bussey from EMA Online and Rivals here with you as we get ready to talk Cats. A lot has happened in the last 24 hours.
Has it?
Yeah, it has. We've got a basketball game coming up, which is
There is?
typically what we plan on talking about on Fridays. But that's actually number 3 on the list of things that we're going to get to today because we need to talk about OU and Texas. They are getting their early exit. They were able to work some things out finally, and it was a deal that I guess everybody was satisfied. I can't say both parties because it seems like there were more than two. It's not just the Big 12 and then the two schools that are leaving, but also the TV partners. So everybody seems to be happy there. So they will be leaving early, and then a little bombshell started leaking out Thursday morning that there was some evidence that Collin Klein was being suited for the Notre Dame offensive coordinator job that was recently left open when Tommy Rees took off for Alabama. And so Collin Klein, there was a trip to South Bend that took place Wednesday night into Thursday morning. Klein came back to Manhattan. And so at first I kind of wrote it off. I thought, well, it's good, but I can't imagine like Notre Dame. I mean, it's just crazy to think about. Collin Klein has been the offensive coordinator for 15 games of college football now. And for him to already be in a position where Notre Dame was seriously considering him as a candidate, I just didn't see it as fathomable. But then as more details started to emerge, it started to seem like, okay, he's higher on that list than we would think. And here we are Friday morning, just minutes to an hour before we got to recording this. Collin Klein will be staying at K-State and will not be going to Notre Dame, even though the smoke, there's a lot of it, it seems, and the fire at least started to get a little bit hot there. But Collin Klein staying at K-State, and really there are a couple ways to talk about this now because instead of us getting on here and talking about why he would take the job or like what the scenarios and situations would be, because there's a lot of that would have been interesting to go down. K-State not only looking to replace a wide receivers coach, but they could have been looking to replace an offensive coordinator. And it's also kind of tough to go internally to find an offensive coordinator when the quarterback's coach is your offensive coordinator. So typically you would think, okay, well, if an offensive coordinator spot's open, like you go to the quarterback coach, well, that's what Collin Klein does. So you would have had a tough time finding a guy probably in-house. K-State would have had to have looked elsewhere. Fortunately, they don't have to do that as Collin Klein is going to remain at K-State. There are a couple of things here that are pretty easy to surmise. Collin Klein is definitely going to get more money out of this. That this is how things work when people come for you, and typically your current employer wants to retain you. They will pay you more money. And I think the plan all along was probably for Collin Klein to get more money after this past season and to continue. And really all of these coaches are going to they got bonuses and some pay bumps that are coming their way for the performance this past year. But Collin Klein probably got his up a little bit more, knowing that a team that has the status of Notre Dame was interested in Collin Klein as their offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I mean, keeping Collin Klein is definitely a big win for Kansas State. To kind of contradict what you said a little bit there at the beginning, you talked about how you maybe wrote it off a little bit. I don't tend to do that with things like this, especially when big brands, traditional powers in college football history kind of come and get involved with things. Until a coach kind of publicly says, or it's being publicly reported that a coach isn't going to leave for another opportunity at another school, I always kind of struggle to just write it off as rumors or hearsay, especially when it's a school like Notre Dame and a strong up-and-comer like someone like Collin Klein, who seems to be really highly regarded in the coaching circles or coaching carousel, if that's what you kind of want to use to phrase this kind of whole bonanza. I don't know how to describe this whole thing. But yeah, keeping Collin Klein is a huge win for Kansas State. Obviously, he was an integral part in landing Avery Johnson, one of the highest ranked recruits in Kansas State history. But I also think he was really important in the development and the improvement of Will Howard last season, as well as just kind of building a new identity for Kansas State's offense during the 2022 season. And that's something that I think you can maybe expect to take a new step forward in the 2023 season, despite the losses of Deuce Vaughn and some important receivers with Cade Warner and Malik Knowles both leaving for the NFL draft with their eligibility being gone. I guess their eligibility is not gone. They could have come back for another year. But, to be able to retain him when a school like Notre Dame comes sniffing. And Notre Dame is a program that, and as much as like K-State fans maybe don't want to hear this, Notre Dame's a program that's going to better suit Collin Klein to get into a head coaching opportunity than Kansas State probably is. And just like an apt comparison, I mean, Tommy Rees is, a Notre Dame alum, Notre Dame quarterback, Notre Dame player that was very well liked by Notre Dame fans from everything that I remember growing up. He leaves Notre Dame, one of, like I said, the most all-time historic programs ever, to go be the offensive coordinator at Alabama for Nick Saban, because that elevates him. Like that's not a lateral move. That's a move that allows Tommy Rees to get closer to being a head coach. It's a resume builder to go be the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame under Nick Saban. And it's a similar thing with Collin Klein at Notre Dame, but he decides to stay at Kansas State, and he decides to stay with the people and the relationships that he's formed. And, maybe he's not at Kansas State forever, but to keep him for another year is always a good thing for the Wildcats.
I mean, that's a good point, because what this definitely means is as long as things continue on this path, it's not just going to be a one-off that Notre Dame probably comes calling and checking on Collin Klein for an offensive coordinator spot. If it comes up at any other school, like if Notre Dame is interested, that really doesn't rule out, you can't rule out anybody then in the future that's going to come his way. And so it's big for K-State to be able to retain him. Obviously, if you're K-State, you have the built-in advantage of, hey, this is your home. It has been for essentially the last decade outside of a short stint at Northern Iowa. You played here, people love you here, and look at what you did last season, and then look at what you have coming in that you can kind of continue that. And so you can sell the dream to Collin Klein about why K-State is the place, and you can do so only so much with the money, because as we've kind of talked about last night in this situation, financially, K-State could probably like say Notre Dame came in with some astronomical number, and we don't know what the numbers are here, but they come in with some crazy number, and say K-State is even able to match it. It wouldn't have been out of the realm of possibility that Collin Klein, even for the same amount of money or less money, would have decided that Notre Dame was the right option for him, because like you're talking about, being the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame gets you closer to a higher profile head coaching job, if that's what you want, much sooner than what it does at K-State. And that's not saying that Collin Klein, his next job after K-State, won't be being a head coach somewhere, because I'm sure like his name will start to pop up in those conversations too, whenever there's a, like a lower end Power 5 job, or a group of 5 job that's open. Like, he will probably start to get some interest there as well. But that's what Notre Dame could provide. And at K-State, what he has is familiarity with everything going on, a place that he knows he's going to be loved, and also a great foundation. Like, he knows that he's working for a great head coach in Chris Kleiman, and he's got a roster now that you bring back Will Howard, who is on a great upward trajectory. And then, like, after him, you've got Avery Johnson on the roster now, and like Adrian Loris thrown in there. So you've got a really good quarterback room, which has got to be appealing to him. And then you've got promise elsewhere. I mean, you've got the entire offensive line back this season for K-State, and then some. No Deuce Vaughn, but DJ Giddens was really good. And I think Trayshawn Ward is a really exciting addition, not to mention some of the other guys that K-State's been able to add to kind of bolster the running back room. Keegan Johnson, the Iowa transfer, comes in. Some of the guys that were freshmen and sophomore last year that are going to get some run at receiver. Like, there's a lot to like going on there. So I think K-State was able to obviously accurately give their pitch. And then, like, we can't just give this credit to K-State for keeping Collin Klein here. Like, when a guy makes this decision, this is also Collin Klein wanting to be at K-State still. So if I haven't seen many of these people. I think a lot of people were understanding of it. It was just more so, man, I would hate to lose Collin Klein. Yeah. But if you're one of those people that, is a little upset and bummed out that Collin Klein would even entertain a job like this from Notre Dame, you have to listen. Like, we all end up at different times listening to certain jobs. I can tell you this, when I first was reached out about this current job that I have, that we're sitting here doing right now, I wiped out. I was like, no, I don't think so. But then as I started to listen, I was like, you know what? I see the merit here. There's some better options and things I really like about this. And as I talked about it a little bit more, I decided this was what I wanted to do. This was the thing that was right for me. And for Collin Klein, he was able to make the decision that, hey, no, I want to stay at K-State. He chose K-State over Notre Dame in all likelihood. Now, it's a little foggy on if there was an offer from Notre Dame, it seems like, yet, but it certainly seemed like things were trending in that direction. And he was certainly one of the top candidates on their board. So for the news to come out today that he is staying at K-State, it means he chose K-State, and you can at least still have that pride and be satisfied with that. That he obviously cares about K-State, Manhattan, and it also tells you he loves the situation that K-State's in right now. If he can give up what Notre Dame had to offer for him.
Yeah, and I think it's important to just recognize that people have dreams in every industry that they're in. And I would imagine that Collin Klein's dream is to be a college football head coach somewhere. Is his dream job Kansas State? I don't know. Maybe his dream job is to be the head coach at Valdosta State. I don't know. Like, maybe,
wow, that'd be great.
I don't know. I just pulled a random school out of my ass. But maybe he wants to be the head coach at Kansas State. Maybe he wants to be the head coach at Colorado. He grew up in Colorado. I don't know, right? Like, everyone has dreams, but I kind of very seldom believe the whole, like, this is my dream job statement that gets thrown around by a ton of coaches when they get hired. Because I don't think that you necessarily grow up dreaming or get into the coaching industry with one school, one destination identified as that's my one dream. I only want to coach there. That's where I want to go. I think more so your dream often is to be a head coach at a high level, to be a Power 5 head coach, to be a Big 10, Big 12, SEC, ACC, Pac-12 head coach. And it's also important to recognize too, Mason, that like these coaches are wired a lot differently than other people are. And we talked about this last night in our text messages where, a lot of people get paid the type of salary that Collin Klein is getting paid, his several $100,000, or like Chris Kleiman, for example, was kind of connected to a couple different jobs, not connected, but his name was thrown into different hot boards this offseason for different jobs, given the success that Kansas State had. And, a lot of people might be like, why would Chris Kleiman leave Kansas State, given the success that he's had and the stability that he's built there, just for more money? Like, money doesn't drive these guys very often. It's the competitiveness that they have, the want to and the desire to get to the next level, continue to prove that, yeah, like I'm good enough. Yeah, I'm of the ability to take a more prestigious program in the eyes of some to the next level. And I think a great example of that is Brian Kelly or Lincoln Riley leaving destination jobs in the 2021 coaching carousel for other opportunities at jobs that they felt were maybe easier to win a national championship at. Obviously, LSU has had their last three coaches win a national title. USC is, at the time, was in a position to kind of run the West Coast and run the Pac-12 before leaving for the Big Ten. And obviously, Oklahoma's path to winning a national championship when Lincoln Riley left was going to become more difficult moving to the SEC. And we can talk about that a little bit later as that's happening now in 2024. But, these coaches are wired in a different way than a lot of people are. They don't often just get satisfied and get happy being with where they're at. They like accepting new challenges. And Collin Klein is pushing one of those new challenges maybe a little bit down the road because he's happy with where he's at. And that says a lot about what he feels like he has at Kansas State coming up in the 2023 season, and maybe a little bit beyond that as well. But at the end of the day, too, like Kansas State should be very proud to be able to keep Collin Klein. He's an alum. He's a Heisman finalist. He's one of the 3-4 greatest players in Kansas State football history. Like, that's someone that Kansas State fans should love and should want to keep and should want to see in a purple power cat every Saturday on the field, right? Like, those are things that you should be proud of. And to fight off Notre Dame, like, it's Notre bleeping Dame. As much as people hate Notre Dame, it's Notre bleeping Dame. It's arguably the greatest brand in the history of college football. To be able to fight off Notre Dame for Collin Klein is pretty impressive. And maybe you didn't have to fight him off too much because Collin Klein decided he wanted you instead, but that says a lot about who you are and the type of value that he holds you in his heart.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think like as it stands right now, I don't know. It's pretty easy to see why you could think that next year K-State is a better opportunity than Notre Dame right now. Like, Collin Klein has his proven commodity at quarterback, whereas even though what it was, Sam Hartman's the one that they got in the portal from Wake Forest. Like, even though like he's pretty good, you don't necessarily know what you're getting there in that situation. And if we're being honest, like K-State's got a better track record of quarterbacks over the last decade plus than what Notre Dame does. Like Notre Dame, like, and not saying that Collin Klein couldn't change that, but it is just one of those deals where Collin Klein, he chose to stay at K-State as much as K-State was able to keep him here and win him. So both parties are obviously involved in doing this. A lot of it goes into a couple of other things, like from the K-State side of it. Obviously, Gene Taylor has proven himself to be a great athletic director for K-State at this point. He's been able to make great hires, obviously, with Chris Kleiman and Jerome Tang in the two most important sports in college athletics. He's been able to, when needed, pay guys to keep them at a level that matches others around the country. And certainly the K-State coaches were already getting bonuses and raises for their performances. But obviously Gene Taylor is able to work with others around K-State athletics, the boosters that are out there, and they like him enough. They like the direction of K-State enough to where they're able to chip in. And that's one of those reasons too, where like to be able to keep Collin Klein, it's not just a matter of, hey, I love this place and we love him. It's also, you got to be able to kind of match somewhat financially. And so you can pretty easily guess that Collin Klein will be getting some more money. And that's not just a good thing for Collin Klein, but it's a good thing for K-State that they can be able to not just compensate a head coach at a higher level, similar to college football, like they do with Chris Kleiman, but the fact that now even if their hand was forced a little bit in it, but even now if they can do it with an offensive coordinator, because your coordinator spots are also very important. And it would not have been unfamiliar for K-State to lose a coordinator under Collin Klein to a job that maybe could be seen as a little bit bigger. I mean, Scotty Hazelton was gone after 1 year to Michigan State to go coach in the Big Ten. Now, that's a little bit of a different situation, because I don't know necessarily if Michigan State is that much better of a job than K-State. The only thing it has going for it is it's the Big Ten, and Michigan State could offer more money there. But now if K-State is able to match some things and be much closer, that gives them the chance to be able to retain coaches that are doing great things for them. And it's not just the coordinators at K-State, but in the future, you'll have some other things go on. And it also helps to have that personal tie. We just saw it with Thad Ward going to Illinois. Like, Thad Ward was doing great things at K-State, was in a pretty good spot, but Illinois holds a really special place in his heart. And he talked to you all the time about it. And you said, that I think you should really go back to Illinois. And he decided to do it. That last part's not true. I don't want you guys to think Alec's
please
a bad
clear
guy.
that up before I get slammed by K-State fans on every social media platform that ever exists. The last thing I need is my MySpace messages popping off.
I mean, it's good for K-State that they were able to retain Collin Klein. And if the news today was different and it was that he was leaving for K-State, it would not be very fun for K-State to have to deal with, but everybody should at least have been able to understand it. And the biggest takeaway to me in these situations is, don't get upset that there was some smoke and steam there. Be pretty damn excited that K-State has an offensive coordinator that a school like Notre Dame thought would be a big fix to their program and help them out. So this is big for K-State, and it just goes to show the kind of job that Chris Kleiman has done and the rest of these coaches and the position that K-State is in, because that kind of ties into what we're going to talk about next. But we now know Oklahoma and Texas, this is their final upcoming year in the Big 12. They will get out a year early like they wanted to. And that means it sets K-State up in a position with what they have in place right now. We can talk about basketball later, because that's going to be a beast for anybody in the Big 12 to think that they're going to be able to run that, unless you're Kansas, because you will be able to run it because you're Kansas. But everybody else, whatever, tough sailing. It's going to be pretty competitive. In football, though, Oklahoma has dominated the Big 12, and now they are leaving. Texas is leaving. Now, Texas hasn't really dominated the Big 12. They haven't dominated much of anything that people care about here. It always cracks me up. They hate Oklahoma, yet Texas people want to lump themselves into the conversation with Oklahoma just to prop themselves up a little bit. It's like, OU and Texas have won 80% of the Big 12 championships that have ever been played, and Texas has like 2 of them, and Oklahoma's won like 19 of them or something. So shut up and pipe down if you're Texas in this. But K-State being able to retain a guy like Collin Klein, keep most of these pieces intact, they're going to need to do that because there's an opportunity here for them to be able to be the team that kind of runs the Big 12 moving forward. I think a lot of people would look around and say it's K-State, TCU, Oklahoma State, and Baylor are probably the top candidates to be the team that kind of, takes the top spot on the pedestal and is the front runner in the league for many years to come.
Yeah, I think you can throw some of the new schools in there too. Like to be honest with you, I don't know if there's any school in the new Big 12 that you start going like, oh yeah, that's the one that's going to be the bully of the conference.
Yeah,
I guess you could say. Like, I just don't think that there's much of a difference between any of the programs that are going to be competing in the new Big 12 in comparison to, what Texas and Oklahoma were for the last 20 years or the last decade, if you want to just talk about the current Big 12 post Mizzou, post Texas A&M. Because, even though like Texas hasn't won the Big 12 since 2009, like their floor is still a lot higher than a lot of other programs just because of the resources it has. And obviously Oklahoma's done an incredible job since hiring Bob Stoops, winning a national title in was it 2000, and then winning, is it 14 of the however many Big 12 titles have been available to them since joining the league and winning 5 or 6 in a row after from like 15 to 20 or whatever it was. But, all things considered, like, yeah, I think there's an opportunity for new schools to emerge in the Big 12. And I think it's a lot of fun to think about what the Big 12 could look like moving forward, because I do think it's going to be a really fun league to follow because there isn't going to be that one bully. But I do think a bully does kind of have to step up, because if you look at some of the other conferences, right, like in the SEC, you've got Bama and you've got Georgia. In the ACC, you've got Clemson the last several years, but historically, it's Florida State or it's Virginia Tech. In the Big Ten, it's obviously Ohio State and Michigan. Like, you kind of need an enemy, I feel like, for a conference. And for the longest time, like, I feel like that was Texas, or at least over the last decade, that was the impression that I got in my 1 year covering Big 12 football. It seems like people hated Oklahoma because they were good, but people hated Texas because of who they are, what kind of resources they have in comparison to some others in the league that they just aren't as wealthy. They don't have a lot of the same recruiting resources or financial resources that Texas has. And, all those things kind of considered, but you kind of need an enemy. And I feel like there's a couple candidates that could step up. Like TCU, I feel like might be one that could step up. People could get rubbed the wrong way with the Hypnotoad stuff real quick. I feel like
or the fact that like their fans are kind of nasty people that are a little bit uppity and they throw beer bottles on the field during games. Like,
yeah, I mean,
that's pretty easy to dislike.
I think that you could even see some of the new schools doing that.
And not to mention the type of people that Sonny Dykes likes to hire that have
that doesn't help you. Yeah, it doesn't help you, Horned Frogs. I think even some of the new schools could come in, and if they have success, it becomes really easy to dislike the new kid at school when he takes your spot at the lunch table, right? Like, it becomes real easy to become envious of him if he ends up being really cool and having a lot of success on the sports fields, and all the girls find him to be cute, whatever. Like, we all remember those kids in school, right? Like, they weren't our favorite when they.
Dana Holgerson is like the poster child of that. Just the as cute as a button, Dana Holgerson.
So, you put all these things together, and I think it creates an opportunity for the new Big 12 to become incredibly entertaining on a week-to-week basis and really a year-to-year basis, because I don't think that there's going to be a team that dominates it every single year.
Yeah. 14 of 27 Big 12 football titles have been won by Oklahoma.
So I nailed that. Look at me.
There you go. Yep. There you go. They have not won the last 2 though. And that's going to be the goal for these other teams in the Big 12 this year is, all right, we've been able to box Oklahoma and Texas out the last 2 years. Let's make these last 3 years like stand up to where they aren't the team that's winning the Big 12, because that is significant in some ways where, and this is why people that are a part of the current Big 12 and the future Big 12 are a little bit they can get a little bit hot and bothered and frustrated with the conversation sometimes because, yes, Oklahoma has dominated the Big 12 for a long time. But this league is not helpless without Oklahoma and Texas. TCU played in a national championship this year. The last two conference champions from this league are not Oklahoma or Texas. And you have to go, let's see, you have to go all the way back to 2009 for when Texas actually won the Big 12. That's the last time Texas won this league. Nobody's been worried about Texas since then in this league. So the Big 12
coming season.
They're
going to be the favorite moving into the season.
That's great. They won't win it. I can guarantee you right now they will not win it.
You want to guarantee it?
I guarantee it. I guarantee you Texas won't win it. Yeah, we can make a bet. I'll tell you this much too. I will guarantee that Texas isn't even in Arlington playing for the Big 12 championship.
I think they're going to be in Arlington. I don't know if I feel confident in them winning the league, but I think they're going to be there. I
don't think so.
What do we want to wager?
I don't know. We'll have to determine that at some point. If anybody has suggestions, you can tweet it at us. Our handles are below if you're watching on the YouTube, or you can just comment on the YouTube page or in the message board thread over on Emo Online what we should do. But here are the notes on the SEC and the Big 12, like being able to part ways early with each other and how this whole thing is ultimately going to go down. So they will have to pay a combined $100 million in early withdrawal.
Real quick, they're not paying $100 million.
They're forfeiting $100 million. They're sacrificing revenue. Yes,
there's a difference there.
Yeah, so they're not having to actually give anything. It's money that they won't ever actually see. Now that does still impact you in some ways because you budget out in so many ways, and that's what we were talking about with. There's a football game in 2024 between Texas and Michigan that's on the schedule. It was supposed to be played in Ann Arbor in 2027 was the year, right? Or somewhere down the road. And the 2024 game was supposed to be in Austin. They have flipped those, which means that Fox will have the broadcast rights to that game in 2024 when it's played in Ann Arbor.
ESPN in Austin.
No, the game in 2024 will now be played in Ann Arbor, and Fox will have those rights.
Yeah, but wouldn't? Oh, I see what you're saying. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
and they flipped the destination of them, but Fox is going to have the rights of the game earlier than they otherwise would. They
still get the broadcast
rights of a game.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because, and this is me showing the budgeting part. This is all very confusing. This is all like there's so many little things that happen here that you have to like zoom out.
This isn't like confirmed either. I don't think.
No, but this is
and the last guy, and who you're citing here was wrong, I might add, on this whole topic a week ago when we were talking about this.
Oh,
Mr. Thamel, who's always right, was wrong for one.
He was wrong. And which again, who's that?
This guy.
Yeah, I mean, you were right. They got it done. I don't know. I was going to trust the guy that was working for the TV company that was heavily involved in this, unless his job was to be Mr. Doom and Gloom to kind of get things restarted. But
do you think ESPN was like, hey, we need you to put this out so we can get this done?
Maybe scare everybody straight. That was maybe the goal there. But essentially, the way that it works out, and one of the things that has been floated out there, and this was from our boy Pete Thamel, a key part of the deal that let OU and Texas out of the Big 12 early was a game flip of a non-conference matchup between Michigan and Texas. Texas will now visit Michigan in 2024 in Ann Arbor, and Michigan will return the game in Austin in 2027. The schedules had been opposite. And the reason why that's important is essentially because Fox will have the broadcast rights to that game now in 2024, which means like their budget won't change as much. Because if you have a Texas-Michigan game on your schedule, you can budget that in and you're going to make some significant more coin off of that than some other random game. And it would have been kind of a short turnaround for them to kind of get this figured out. So I imagine it has a lot to do with budgeting and making Fox whole there, because then down the road, like they're better equipped for it. They know that they don't have a Texas football game down the road, and it's not as big of a deal. So that's one of the things that's got done. I'm sure that there are a lot more things in this deal that we're yet to hear about and seeing how this is ultimately going to play out. But the two sides did come to a deal. There's going to be some extra revenue coming to the schools in the Big 12, and that's important for a number of reasons, one of which may just be for some schools like K-State paying an offensive coordinator that was talking to Notre Dame more money. So getting money that you weren't counting on at this date is an important deal, as opposed to letting things bleed out. And that's ultimately why it did serve the Big 12 well enough to get out of this thing early. You had two schools that didn't want to be here. You don't want them in league meetings with you. You don't want to have to keep dealing with their crap. And you would rather them ultimately have to give up some money to you for leaving and kind of screwing you over versus just letting them walk away free, which would have been the ultimate goal. Like Brett Yormark would have, given the bird and double fingers to OU in Texas if he said, hey, sit down and shut up. You're sticking out the entirety of this, and you're here for the final 2 years. That would have pissed Oklahoma and Texas off. They would have stewed about it and continued to complain. But at the end of the day, one thing that is a lot better than just kind of getting revenge on people is still kind of getting revenge and making them sacrifice money to you. And that's what Brett Yormark was able to do here, as well as the TV partners. So the Big 12 is able to get this thing split and cleaned up at this moment.
Yeah, I just think back to Ross Dellinger's report last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever this stuff kind of started to break, and Pete Thamel kind of started it all with his report that negotiations were kind of stopping. Ross Dellinger kind of reported the opposite and was like, yeah, like, I don't think that that's necessarily true, or my reporting isn't telling me that. And I kind of kept going back to some quotes that he had. One of them coming from a K-State, or not K-State, excuse me, Big 12 athletic director or administrator, kind of saying like, yeah, like, we don't want them here anymore. They don't want to be here anymore. Like, the schools, the conferences have already worked this all out. This is up to Fox and ESPN to figure it out now, because all the less really rich people, so the really, really rich people, the TV networks, the ones who kind of run college sports now, like, they were the ones who were holding this up. It wasn't the Big 12. The Big 12 was like, leave, please leave. We don't want you here anymore. Go away. Go do your things in the SEC. And the SEC was like, come on. Like, we're publicly saying, yeah, 2025 is when you're going to be here. But, like, privately, come on. Like, they knew that 2024 was more realistic the entire time. And it's all happening at a really good time, too, in my opinion, in college football. So much going on with the likes of Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC in 2024. USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten in 2024, the college football playoff expanding in 2024 to a 12-team model. And even you can kind of include at this point, the Big 12 getting to its new standpoint now in 2024 with a 12-team league. And I guess potentially, like, you're looking at a new Pac-12 media rights if you want to include that, or maybe that includes some new members, considering some reporting that's been going on this week with San Diego State, putting some statements out. Obviously, George Kliavkoff visiting. Did I say that right?
Kliavkoff, yeah.
Wow, I'm going to give myself a pat on the back. I did that pretty quickly. Visiting SMU, even though that was supposed to be a private meeting, and all these different things. Like, 2024 is turning into this big time, massive year of change in college football. And it's just nice to rip the Band-Aid off and have it all happen at one time. And I understand, like, what I'm about to say might upset and frustrate Big 12 fans, but, like, I don't know how you can't be excited about what the new SEC is going to offer in terms of an entertainment package. It's going to be incredibly entertaining, lots of high-profile games, an reintroduction, I guess you could say, of a rivalry game that people really enjoyed watching with Texas and A&M, going at it around Thanksgiving or Black Friday. And then obviously, like, if you're a Big 12 fan too, like, you get the two people out of your league that you didn't really enjoy being in your league regardless anyway. From an Oklahoma standpoint of kicking your behind, and Texas from a standpoint of just being kind of annoying and
kicking everybody else's behind. K-State's behind was not getting kicked by Oklahoma.
That's true. Saying. Good call. Well, yeah. You just kind of, like, put all these things together, and I don't know how you can't be excited for the 2024 season in college football, because there's so much changing, and it's going to be a lot of fun to kind of see all this stuff go into perspective. And I kind of, like, tie it back to, like, the transfer portal going in with immediate eligibility, and, like, NIL going in with immediate eligibility. Like, think about how much fun that first year was, and all those new things are going on where, a lot of people found that supposed to be a headache. I found it to be a lot of fun and kind of cool to kind of see how it all goes. But I feel like the stuff that changes in 2024 is more on the field changes. And those are even more fun to even kind of think about and discuss and kind of witness because, like I said, like I think the new SEC is going to be awesome. I think the new Big 12 is going to be incredibly entertaining. And I think the new Big 10 is going to be really fun as well with USC probably going to Ohio State on the very first weekend of conference play in 2024. Or at least that's what I believe is going to happen. Because why would you not do that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be fun to see for these leagues to get new blood and how they interact with each other. And from a standpoint of like individual games, it elevates the profile of some of the games that these leagues are going to get. The Big 12 is still hurt by it. I'm still not convinced that like college football as a whole is actually better for it. Yes, you're getting better game like this team versus this team. But also, like in the grand scheme of things, I don't know that it serves college football well to have, two leagues essentially be at the forefront of it, and then the other three are kind of competing to be the number three. Because I just think so much of college football, and some people disagree with me on this, but so much of college football, even if you don't have a chance, is feeling like you have a chance and you're competing in the same thing as everybody else. As we saw this year with TCU. TCU didn't have a chance to beat Georgia in the national championship. Really? Yeah, believe it or not, they did not have a chance to win that. But TCU had the belief they could get there. They could still at least make it to a national championship game and compete in it and be a part of that. My concern would be that this takes so many more steps forward in the future with conference realignment, and it goes to a stage where it's just the Big Ten and the SEC, and they're their own thing. And the other schools are like, okay, you're kind of your own division now. Well, that's not as fun. Like for me, like I would not find myself watching Big Ten or SEC games because I wouldn't care. That has no bearing on me. You know what I don't watch right now? FCS football because I don't care. It does not matter to me in any way as somebody that went to K-State and covers K-State to what Montana State and Montana are doing. Don't care.
Dude, game day went there this year.
I'm sorry, Chris Kleiman. I don't care what the Bison do every single year because it doesn't matter to me. It just doesn't. So that's the kind of thing that I'd be worried about. I think the good news is it seems like the chatter on that has slowed a little bit where there's not as much of this. The Big Ten and the SEC are going to be their own big thing at some point. But I do, still have some concerns about the future of college football, but that's for another time and everything else.
Well, and I do feel like the 12-team playoff kind of prevents some of that with the opportunity for the 6 highest ranked conference champions to essentially get an automatic qualifier into the playoff. Like it allows, the Big 12, the ACC, the Pac-12, and a Group of 5 conference to get a bid into the 12-team playoff. And like you said, make them think they have an opportunity to win a national title because, currently as it stands, right, like, no conference has won a national title except the Big Ten or the SEC. And I guess Clemson has won them in the ACC in the playoff era. And the Big 12 hasn't won a national title since Texas in 06. Is that right? 05? I guess it was the 06 national title, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So like they haven't won one in a while. The Pac-12 hasn't won one since USC in like a year prior to Texas winning one. Yeah. So like, I think the way I kind of phrase what you're saying is you want to essentially trick people into thinking they have a chance to win a national title, right? Like TCU thought they had a chance to win a national title.
You want to feel like you're included in the big picture of everything,
But like, you don't really have a chance to win a national title if you're TCU and you're playing Georgia.
Yes, correct. Like
eventually your boogeyman is going to be at the end.
So essentially, the idea of this is it's like the achievement for some is being in the mix of one thing. Yeah. So like I'll use this in like a golf analogy. If you're one of the amateurs that gets invited to play in the Masters and you show up to Augusta and they say to you, hey, you're here, you get to play the course and everything, but you're actually like, we're not counting your scores in the main field of our competitors. You're just going to go off and kind of do your own thing. Like you and the amateurs, you're just going to play by yourselves. We're not even going to show you on the main leaderboard. You're really not a part of this, but you're getting to play. You got invited to Augusta. You're at the 2023 Masters, whatever, but it's just you and the amateurs. That's the only thing you're competing for. While that would still be enjoyable or whatever, that's not, you would feel a little bummed out. You'd be a little disappointed. You'd be a little frustrated inside if you were that amateur. And to me, the way that college football is structured now is how it is for the Masters or any of these majors, where the amateurs get invited. They get to go play. They are in the main field. And hey, guess what? Friday afternoon, you might see somebody with that little A next to their name inside the top 15 or whatever. Like, oh, okay. Like when Victor Hovland was playing in like the U.S. Open as an amateur, like his name might pop in. Okay, whatever. And at the end of the day, you get to Sunday afternoon and you're in Butler Cabin and they're showing the final leaderboard and the amateurs are nowhere to be found on the first 2 pages. But at the end of the day, you're still able to compete in it. And if you are the low am, you do still win something. Like you get tabbed as low am, you win a trophy and a medal from these major events. And that's essentially the way college football is structured right now. Whereas there are a lot of teams that cannot win a national championship at this point. And it's not just the teams that aren't in the Big Ten and the SEC. It is teams within those conferences that we know can't win a national championship.
My alma mater.
But what they can still do is they can essentially win that low am honor, where they can still win a conference championship and then get themselves in the mix.
On your press box, hey, we qualified for the college football playoff.
Exactly. And that, like, I can guarantee you, like, next time somebody goes to Amon G. Carter Stadium, you will see that they were a part of the 2023 college football playoff. And that's totally fine. And I think that's what is good about college football, is that everybody is connected in some way. And even if these games don't directly matter, they do still matter in some way to you, even if it's not for a national championship. But like it was entertaining to follow along with the SEC race this year and see who K-State might be playing in a Sugar Bowl and how it kind of crazily worked out that it was Alabama that they got to play. So that's kind of off topic of all this, but it's just one of those things that I thought was kind of notable. One other thing to dive into with conference realignment, you brought it up with Mr. Kleavkov and SMU of all these places about how there's been a lot of news with the Pac-12 that has come out this week on their realignment stuff. And most of it has not been the most flattering to the efforts of the Pac-12 and what could be coming next for them. It makes people that have been in on the Big 12 side throughout all of this feel vindicated in what they thought, and also pretty happy to see that the Pac-12 isn't going to probably get what they thought they were going to get. A couple of things. Stuart Mandel, who has been one of the most pro Pac-12 guys and has been a champion and carrier of the banner that says the Pac-12 is going to make more money than the Big 12. The Pac-12 is in a better spot than the Big 12. Had a report this week that the Pac-12 indeed may not make as much money as the Big 12, or certainly isn't going to get what George Kleavkov was suggesting that the Pac-12 was going to get. So that is significant. In addition to that, San Diego State is a logical fit for the Pac-12. It makes sense. Over like the last 10 or 15 years, the only school that has a combined winning percentage higher in football and men's basketball than San Diego State is Ohio State. San Diego State makes sense. Like they're a good basketball school and they're a respectable football school. They also have a brand new football stadium that, even though it gets far too hot for people to actually enjoy, they got a new stadium. It's nice, whatever.
What game was that this past year?
It was like their season opener. I don't remember who they were playing, but it was like their first or second game of the season.
I remember that.
They, nobody could actually sit and watch the game because it got too hot. But San Diego State makes sense, fine, whatever. It's nothing crazy, but like that's one of those where if we're being honest with each other, if San Diego State was in the Big 12, we'd be like, oh, that's pretty, that's a solid move, whatever. They fit in with the 4 schools the Big 12 added. But the other one that there is some serious smoke to, because Mr. George Kleavkov was in attendance at an SMU basketball game at Moody Coliseum. I have no idea if it's
Moody
the same
family, by the way.
I don't know, but I don't know if there's relation.
I read
there,
that in the athletic story. I was like, who the hell is this Moody family?
They love the state of Texas, I guess.
And they love the basketball programs in Texas.
Yeah,
apparently.
Big basketball family. George was at an SMU game this past weekend talking to all the SMU dignitaries. And let me just tell you this. SMU, I'm sure they're fine, whatever, good for them. They are a private school similar to TCU. They are no longer affiliated with the Methodist Church. That ended in 2019. So even though they're Southern Methodist, they are no longer affiliated with the church. But what you got going on there? I can hear myself all of a sudden in the background.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I didn't do anything differently.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyways, SMU, like 12,000 people. That's their enrollment, their undergrad enrollment. And here's what's interesting about this.
I just hit my microphone there.
I did hear that one. The Pac-12, we're doing great here. The Pac-12, what it likely looks like they're going to have to do to get more money than the Big 12 to win this battle of the dollars, they are going to have to put basically their entire inventory on a streaming platform. If you add SMU into a streaming platform where you need people to be subscribed, does adding a private school like SMU as one of your two additions make any sense at all when it's a small like fan base that's actually going to follow?
Well, the reason you're doing it is just so the streaming platform has more inventory to broadcast. You're not necessarily trying to draw more eyeballs by bringing in SMU. You're just trying to bring in more inventory.
Yes. Yeah, I get that. But also like in to some extent, like you do have to be in a position where it's going to make sense, you know? Like I don't know. I just think it's kind of
okay, so here's my thing. I think the way that the Big 12 and the Pac-12 have behaved since the Texas and Oklahoma thing has not been in the best interest of either league throughout the entire dealings.
yeah.
Like it turned into a point where they were like fighting each other more so than they were trying to better themselves almost, in my opinion. Like, and that's like the impression I've always kind of gotten. I was always the type of person who like made fun of the alliance, the Big Ten, the Pac-12, and the ACC made after the Texas and Oklahoma move was announced because it meant nothing. They looked each other in the eyes and they shook their hands, or I think is what Jim Phillips said. And it was like, well, that means nothing. Like that means nothing. Like sign paperwork that says you're not going to poach.
Actually, it did mean something because the Big Ten, they did their part in the alliance. Like they extended
they ripped the alliance apart.
Yeah,
what do you mean?
They extended an olive branch to the two teams in the alliance that they actually respected, and they invited them to come join their league. So how much more can you be aligned with a conference than saying we respect you so much, we want your two best, we want them to be a part of us. You know, that's how I see it.
Like I thought the alliance was stupid, but I was the person when people asked me. And not a lot of people ask me because my opinion doesn't generally matter on this. So if you want to stop listening at this point, be my guest. I was under the impression, just from reading different things and listening to different things, that what the Pac-12 and the Big 12 should have done was actually form an alliance and actually sign paperwork that would allow them to have negotiated their media rights deals together and potentially get more revenue combined. Obviously, I'm not saying merge the two leagues and become a super league where you've got 24 members in one league. No, don't do that. But just create an alliance where the two leagues are together and you go to different things together. You have these initiatives together for, I don't know, like social awareness things or negotiating your TV rights together. Like I think doing all those things together could have benefited the two leagues in the long run instead of the infighting that happened the moment Texas and Oklahoma left, of the Pac-12 trying to poach the Big 12's most valuable brands, and then USC and UCLA leaving the Big Ten, and Brett Yormark saying at media days, hey, we're open for business. And then George Kliavkoff responds with his comment of like, yeah, we are too. Like we're going shopping there or whatever, right? Like, you know, like I think they hurt themselves in this aspect. And I think the Big 12 right now, public perception wise, is in a better spot because they got their media rights deal done. They opened up their negotiating rights earlier, and they got a good deal for themselves, more than what I think a lot of people maybe expected them to get from television networks, and it set them up to be in a good spot. And now the Pac-12, you know, they've kind of kicked their can down the road, and it's been like, well, they're close. Well, Mason, I feel like they've been close since like October.
Yeah, they've been close for a while.
And checks the calendar date. It's like February 10th. Yeah. So, you know, like you put all these things together and it's, you know, I think the Pac-12 is hurting from the standpoint of their exposure maybe isn't going to be as great as it is currently because you're losing your two biggest brands, but then you're also potentially going on a streaming platform. And then to go on a bigger streaming platform and get the type of money that you want from an Amazon and Apple TV, whoever, like you need more inventory. So you have to go add a brand like SMU, who was passed over by the Big 12, was passed over by other leagues at different times to be added. Like the Pac-12 clearly isn't in a great spot right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's unfortunate to go back to what you said earlier about how, you don't know if this is currently good for college football. Yeah, like I don't know if it's good for college football that this stuff is happening, but I do think it would have been good for college football instead of the Big 12 and Pac-12 fighting to be number 3, they joined together and they were number 3 together, right? Like I think that's kind of what I've always kind of thought with the two leagues. And I get that people are like, no, like conference pride, like we want to be our own thing. We want to have our own media rights deal. We want to be on ESPN and Fox on our own. Like I get all that. But at the same time, too, it's one of those things where, in my opinion, like you could have benefited yourself. And this is all living in retrospect. So it's useless to even live in this reality world that I'm talking about. But that was always like my opinion on it when they left.
You're not wrong on some of this. Now, the one thing that would change this and should change this, like the Pac-12, they were the ones that, well, first off, you have to understand this about the conference realignment thing. This goes beyond the Pac-12, just having the Big 12 having issues with the Pac-12. This actually starts with the American Athletic Conference, the wimpiest, the softest, the biggest bunch of losers, pardon my French, the shittiest conference in the way that they operate and the schools that they have, thinking big bad Mike Oresco, thinking that he was going to be able to come in and poach the Big 12. And that was what the initial conversation was. And Mike Oresco, because he had connections, he had worked at ESPN prior and had some of these things working out. He had these national pundits and these writers that wanted to dump on the Big 12. He had them trying to gas up too. Oh, well, the American could take these Big 12 schools. And so that was the first thing the Big 12 had to fight off was the puny, wimpy American Athletic Conference, the Power 6 bullcrap that they've tried to push the last however many years, which, by the way, I love when they show a Power 6 commercial and it's filled only with teams that have either left the league or are leaving the league. Great. Keep championing UConn, winning you a national title, a school that's been in the Big East for 5 years now. All that great stuff. Oh, the UCF did this? That's great. They're in the Big 12 now. Cincinnati did that? They're in the Big 12 now. Show me something that somebody has done when they were in the American Athletic Conference, Mike. So the Big 12 had to fight that off at first. That would be very frustrating. And then the Pac-12, they come in here, and George Kliavkoff has been very much West Coast stereotype.
He's a bozo.
He is Mr. Elite.
He's a bozo.
He thinks he is an elitist. He thinks he knows what's going on. He thinks he's better than everybody. He thinks the Pac-12, he thinks that they are the big swinger. They're not. They have found that out now.
I like the Pac-12. I stayed up and watched the end of the USC game last night. I enjoy the Pac-12. I enjoy Pac-12 basketball. I enjoy
enjoy their
football.
content. You don't enjoy the league.
That's not true. I don't dislike the Pac-12 league. I think George Kliavkoff is a bozo when he says things like UCLA is actually going to lose money going to
exactly. So that's the kind of thing, like UCLA and USC had to fight that themselves, but then for Kliavkoff to try and suggest and try and go after the Big 12 and try and make these moves or whatever else were out there, the Pac-12 was the one that tried to be the aggressor in all this. And the Big 12, what they ended up having was a bunch of schools that wanted to stay unified. And so when the Pac-12, after already surviving, I don't know, I wouldn't call it a battle, and I'm not sure that a shot was fired. It's like, I don't know, like you go to a rock fight and the first person to like throw anything is a little kid that walks in and throws like a little piece of sand. And you're like, okay, I'm not going to retaliate to that. Like, that's just whatever. Get out of here, you loser. That's what the Big 12 had to deal with the American. Now, it would still piss you off. Like, you would still be frustrated that this little shrimpy kid just threw this little piece of sand at me. And I very easily could take a rock to his head. The Big 12 did do that. They took the 4 biggest brands in the American and sucked them in to strengthen their league when they needed to keep some life going here. But then Big George Kliavkoff comes in and he thinks, oh, I'm gonna run this thing. The Pac-12 is this, the Pac-12 is that. They did the alliance, trying to do all this crap.
Which meant nothing, by the way.
Which meant nothing. And then here we are when the Pac-12 started to fight and then the Big 12 fought back. That's when all of a sudden, oh, George takes offense to it and everything. So Brett Yormark, his comments at Big 12 Media Day about being open for business, that is in retaliation to the Pac-12 coming in and trying to stir this up and everything. So, and I get, like, I see this from a Big 12 perspective very much. But I think in this situation that has helped in some ways, because I do think some outsiders such as, Stuart Mandel and other national media guys that tend to prefer the Pac-12 for whatever reason haven't been able to see this as clearly. So the Big 12, yes, the fighting back and forth, there could have been things that were done to benefit both leagues. But what you have to understand is that this comes down to a personal thing. And if the two leagues merged, one of these guys is without a job. And neither of these guys wants to lose a high-paying job. But you wanted them to come to some kind of agreement.
I wanted them to do their version of the alliance, but actually make it mean something.
But put pen to paper.
Yes, that's what I wanted. Hey, we're not going to take your schools.
Yeah.
We're coming together. We're going to join together and view things the same when it comes to social justice movements. For example, like when the Big Ten, ACC, and Pac-12 joined together, that was 2021. Was that when that was? No, I think that was 2020.
Yeah, it was 2021.
I think it was 2020.
Maybe it was. Yeah, I don't know, but for whatever reason, I feel like it was after the Big 12, like the Big 12 knew that they were falling apart. I think it was 2021.
It was.
But it's very Pac-12 that they still did
press conference.
They still did a Zoom press conference for it, and it felt like it was much more COVID. No, dude, I didn't care, and because people in Big 12 country, people in Big 12 country knew it was bullshit from the get-go. They knew that.
I did too. When I heard Jim Phillips say to me, and all the big J's, I like to consider myself a big J. Those guys, the Pete Thamels of the world, are the big J's. Like, when I heard Jim Phillips say, hey, no, we looked each other in the eyes and we shook hands, I was like, you're just so stupid. Like, to think that even like me, a naive student journalist, is going to listen to this and be like, oh yeah, that means something. Like, what I wanted them to do was actually put pen to paper, sign this stuff, and say, we're not taking your members. We're going to join together and we're going to fight on the same ideas for social justice movements, whether it's the Black Lives Matter movement. Like, that's something that like those three leagues in the alliance did. Like, they did certain things like that. They had summits where they brought student athletes from each conference and each school together and had these big conferences and whatever, right? Like, that's what they did. Like, what the Big 12 and Pac-12 should have done, in my eyes, is actually put pen to paper, sign up to do all those same kind of things, but also say, hey, ESPN, if you want to put us on TV, you're going to put us all on TV, and you're going to pay us all a good penny.
Yeah, I just the thing that killed that was like the Pac-12. Was
the Pac-12 alliance being aggressive as hell, and
the alliance had something to do with it too.
Shop there,
where if the Big 12 feels no need to help the Pac-12 out after the Pac-12 said, see ya, we're going to go join up with the Big Ten, ACC. So the Pac-12 handled this poorly
from a get-go.
And the way they handled it has then led to the Big 12 coming back and in some ways acting similar to the Pac-12. The one thing that the Big 12 has to benefit them is the fact that they have the TV deal done now. I thought it was hilarious that and you pointed it out too, was even after like it's starting to look like the Big 12 may indeed get more money than the Pac-12, old Stewie Mandel still had to like kind of, throw the stone in there of what the Pac-12 thinks. And it's, oh, well, the house is worth this, but they sold it for much less. And now we're screwed because we can't sell our house at a similar value
I gotta go find that price we wanted. Because I thought it was hilarious.
Like, shut up. Just shut up. You're an absolute clown. So the Big 12 has reacted in a very aggressive manner.
This was the quote from the story. It's tough to sell your house. This was a Pac-12 athletic director administrator in a story that Stuart Mandel published at The Athletic. It's tough to sell your house when your neighbor sells theirs for cheap. And I said, basically that athletic director just said, our house isn't nice anymore, but neither is their house because the guys down the street built an $8 billion home. Yeah. Meaning the Big Ten built an $8 billion mansion. And like the Big 12 and the Pac-12 just don't have the resources to build an $8 billion mansion. Like, that is what the Pac-12 athletic director said, and I just thought it was hilarious. Like he admits it, like, hey, we don't really have that nice of a house. Like you guys don't either in comparison to those guys down the street. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just it's just one of those things that the way it played out was the Pac-12 did all these things at first that they did not want to give the life preserver to the Big 12. And so when the Big 12 went out and just said, "Okay, screw it, we'll figure it out ourselves," and they did start to figure it out for themselves, and then all of a sudden the Pac-12 each day that went by, you're like, "Oh, I might need actually some help here. Can you do this for me?" And you're like, "Nope, hey, you're on your own. Like this is just how it goes."
I guess I want to ask you this. So I view 2024 as like the end game as we know it currently in college football. And again, this all circles around college football. As much as you and I both love college basketball,
Yeah.
it just doesn't matter that much in these conversations.
Yep.
I view 2024.
Whoa. Would you tell that to a KU fan's face?
Yeah. I don't care. Listen, I can take it.
I know. I just was making you aware that that KU people think that basketball drives a ton of money and that's why the Big Ten would want them.
So where I'm going with this is that I view 2024 as the end game as we know it when it comes to major realignment in conferences, the playoff expanding. Like I view 2024 as the end game as we currently know it, / like a new beginning as we currently know it. But I guess I'll put it to you this way. We know that conference realignment isn't done. And the fact that we call it conference realignment is stupid. We should just call it conference alignment because it's always happening. It's always moving. So do you think
conference calibration is
I like the
term we should use? Yeah.
Do you think that a Big 12 or Pac-12 member ever switches leagues to go to the other again, like Colorado did back in, was it 2012?
Colorado, they left. They were the first. Them and Nebraska were the first ones to leave. So they left in 2010. So 2011 was their first year in their new leagues.
And then a year later, Texas A&M and Missouri left.
Yeah,
for 2012.
I do think that at some point, and I'm not going to say that. Well, 2024, I think will be when this is like done and put to bed.
Oh, I don't. Because eventually, like,
no, like
after that, the ACC's grant of rights.
That's not what I'm saying. But like this specific part that we're in will be done. Like because similar to the Nebraska, Colorado, A&M, Missouri thing that happened, and like Utah going to the Pac-12 and everything, like that took place over a couple of years. And obviously, we're going on a couple of years of dealing with all this now. But I do think that but then we had like a decade of peace, essentially. You know, we were not in wartime in college sports where everything was fine. But we were fine, whatever. And then
the athletes were at war with the system instead of the system being at war with the system.
But I do think that I would imagine that we see Pac-12 schools end up in the Big 12 at some point. I think that it seems like there's so much frustration going, and like Brett Yormark, he's this forward thinker. He does what he can. Like it may extend the deadline that this 2024 date kind of is, where it may extend into 25, 26. We'll see kind of what like Oregon and Washington would do. But the one that's always been floated out there since this got going is that the four corner schools in the Pac-12, the two Arizonas, Utah, and Colorado, would be candidates to jump to the Big 12. And we'll see if that happens. I don't know. If you ask me, I'd give it a 51% chance versus a 49% chance of it not happening. So I think it's more likely that it does happen at some point. I don't know exactly when it would. But I don't know. With all the discourse and frustration that seems like people in the Pac-12 are starting to have, and the way that Brett Yormark and the Big 12 have stayed aggressive, I would not be shocked and I would not be surprised if at some point we're talking about certain Pac-12 schools coming to the Big 12, and those four corner schools would seem like the likely targets. And then if Oregon and Washington are out there still too, and obviously if you weaken most of that league and you lose four schools, then you're in a position where Oregon and Washington would need a landing spot. And if they don't go to the Big 10, then it would be the Big 12.
Yeah, I mean, if the Arizona schools, Colorado and Utah leave, there is no Pac-12. Like,
yeah,
Pac-10, there's no Pac conference. It just wouldn't exist. It would be like the Southwestern Conference. It just would not be a thing anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I feel like it happens or not. I think that the 12-team playoff could prevent it from happening potentially.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Yeah,
do think
as long as money is in a good enough place, I do think a team like Oregon and Washington, they'd be stupid to leave the Pac-12 because they are
well, I mean,
clearly
they wanna
set
be in
up
the
to
Big Ten.
dominate that thing. Well, yeah, but like that because of financials. But like if financially they can't, like if the Big Ten isn't going to take them right now
Yeah.
and financially they're okay,
Well, and we know the Big
it
Ten's not
wouldn't make
taking them
sense.
right now because they didn't add them.
Yes. Yeah, but like in the future, if the Big 10 still doesn't want them, the Big 12 is their option, but financially there's going to be a little bit less in the Pac-12 and they can just dominate that league. I could see them doing that, but I don't know. Well, there's a lot to get into in it. It's a fascinating conversation. And that's why the rebranded conference calibration is always going to be a fun thing to talk about. And I'm forever going to refer to it as that because that's what it is. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it's not
calibrating
realignment.
it's
It's always
calibrating college
aligning.
football to the right spot, or maybe conference curation. You're curating the way that college football is set up. I don't know. Let's talk basketball. Let's talk
Yeah,
basketball
let's do
right
this
now.
quick.
Yeah, we have not talked basketball yet. The Wildcats are going to be in Lubbock on Saturday. It is a late tip, 6:00. What the hell's going on? ESPN Plus, and let's real quick scheduling note. K-State, Iowa State next weekend is now going to be at 1:00 instead of 5:00. The game is moved to 1:00 so it can be shown on ESPN. And I saw a lot of people doing the
Did it get flushed out of
sarcastic.
ESPN Plus?
What?
Was it originally on ESPN
No,
Plus?
it was on ESPN, ESPN2, ESPNU was the designation. So they could have been on any of those. And that's the point here. I saw a lot of people that were like, oh, but we can't flex out of games. We can't, we're told we don't flex out of games. A game that was supposed to be on ESPN Plus cannot be flexed out of because there is a contract with the Big 12 and ESPN that states X amount of games is going to be on ESPN Plus. And if a game is set for ESPN Plus, it is stuck there. Now, ESPN can, if it's going to be on one of their linear networks, move games around and work it to how they see fit. So if they saw K-State and Iowa State as this great game that they wanted on ESPN, main ESPN, as some have called it, the Mecca, that's what they're going to do. They're going to move it to that
Bramwich
point.
Coliseum.
Yes. So that's what happened there. I just wanted to get that out there. Also, because of that move, I would imagine we better be tuned into game day tomorrow because I would have a sneaking suspicion that K-State Iowa State is on the short list of college game days for Saturday, February 18th, which I know Alec loves. He loves a long day of hustle and bustle with game day around. But
no, I do not want to go to Jay Billis's media availability.
The Billistrator.
To hear him talk. Huh?
The Billistrator.
You know, if I honestly, would it be funny if I went to that and just asked Jay Billis a bunch of questions about how much he likes the NCAA? Jay, I know you're a big fan of the NCAA. What do you think of the new president?
Or ask Seth Greenberg about beating Duke all those times and making a career out of it and not actually being able to make it to the NCAA tournament ever.
LaFonso.
Fonz. What was it like playing for the Nuggets? Those are my questions. It's unreal. How many coaches have done this in their career? Like post 1990. I'm looking at Seth Greenberg here in his coaching career. When he was at Long Beach State, the Beach, he took them to 2 NCAA tournaments. And those were within the first, those were all within the first 5 seasons of being a college basketball head coach. The rest of his career that spanned from 1995 to 2012, he only went to 1 more NCAA tournament. But the man coached in, 8 NITs in his career, including 5 of them at Virginia Tech. I can't imagine how one guy can coach in that many NITs at a Power 5 school and keep his job for that long. Like, especially when there's only been 1 other NCAA tournament appearance thrown in there. That's crazy to me, but whatever. Okay, off of the game day, guys. We're focused on Texas Tech. We don't look ahead to anything.
Next Saturday's slate is brutal. I'm looking at the other games.
That's great. Just as I said, we don't look ahead to anything.
Sorry, I'm looking at
ahead.
Baylor at Kansas is an interesting one that they could also potentially go to. I'm sure that makes a lot of our listeners happy.
Mm-hmm.
Providence against Villanova. That's at Providence. I know you hate the Friars, but that'd be a fun
I
place
don't hate
to
the
go.
Friars. No, I actually like Providence. I just, they may be frauds of some kind, but I like Ed Cooley.
Indiana hosts Illinois. That's a potential one, I guess,
Yeah.
because Indiana's like back.
Yeah. Well, is Illinois back?
No, they
Okay.
suck.
All right. So K-State, Texas Tech. We'll talk about this in a semi quick manner because Tech is the worst team in the league. They have proven that time and time again.
Not what your rankings say.
That's true. That is true.
Gotcha.
I do still indeed think Oklahoma is actually the worst team in the league. I think Tech
Then you
has a
just
little bit more
lied to
fight
all
in
of
them.
our listeners.
Well, but
How do you feel
statistically
about that?
speaking, Tech is the worst team in the league. So, and I look, you know what I'm going to say on Monday when we're previewing Oklahoma? I'm going to say K-State is playing the worst team in the league. So it works in both ways. Just, my rankings, the actual Big 12 standings, they can be separate from each other. K-State was able to just kind of take care of business the first game against Texas Tech. It wasn't the prettiest of games, but they were able to find a way to pull away and win by double digits. This is the kind of game that teams that are in the upper half of the league just go and find a way to win. And more
What
importantly
about
for
Iowa State?
K-State, well, except Iowa State, that's pretty impressive the way they found a way to lose it. Because Texas Tech, the reason they're so bad this year is they more so find ways to lose games for themselves, similar to what happened against Oklahoma State in the middle of the week and a lot of other games that you can find. Their home game against Oklahoma, like the second or third game of conference play that they found a way to lose. So Texas Tech is just, they are probably similar to what K-State has been the last couple of years, where K-State could show up and be competitive with about anybody in the league, and you wouldn't be surprised if K-State gave you a game. But more likely than not, K-State wasn't going to have the horses and the mindset and whatever else it takes to finish the job and get over the hump and actually win the game. And that's what Texas Tech is, essentially. So I'm not too concerned for K-State, like relative to the rest of the Big 12. We've talked about this. The Big 12 is in a position where you can't just write any game off as a win, but this is one that K-State should be able to handle, especially since Texas Tech is still dealing with injuries. It seems unlikely that Pop Isaacs is going to play. He was still in a boot on Wednesday night when he was at the game in Stillwater for Texas Tech. Fardaz Amac is probably not going to play. Even if he does, he wasn't even that much of a factor the first time that they played each other. And then Daniel Bacho was coming off of something. He played on Wednesday, but has been a little bit limited. So they still have some dudes like Kevin O'Banner is very good, Davion Harmon and everything, but they're not at full. Yep, but they're not at full strength. And ultimately, K-State should be able to find a way to take care of business. And they're going to, I think, just need to treat this game like they did against TCU, where K-State played an undermanned TCU team that was not very good offensively. And so K-State did enough offensively and played good defense to be able to shut it down. And I think that's what this comes down to is K-State can play a really ugly game here, but just make sure that you're keeping Tech at arm's length the entire time and don't do anything to give them life. So again, in a game like this, to me, this is much more about what K-State is going to do than what Texas Tech can do. Because the only way Tech dictates how this game turns out is if they shoot the ball at some crazy clip and they're like 50% from three on Saturday. Because if not, then K-State loses this game because K-State lost it themselves. Texas Tech didn't win the game.
Yeah, it's a game that K-State needs to win. Obviously, Texas Tech, like you've pointed out, is one of the worst teams in the Big 12, 1-10 record at this point. They lost on Wednesday night at Oklahoma State, 71-68, although that game was nuts down the stretch. It was a close one. Each team had an opportunity to kind of get a win. Oklahoma State was able to pull it out. It's a game that Texas Tech is probably going to struggle in, like you said, with the injuries to some of their key players. Fardaz Amac is obviously one of the biggest ones. Pop Isaacs. It's another one, although Pop is not very efficient as a shooter this year. He is someone who can kind of pour it in. And it's a pretty favorable matchup for K-State because, Texas Tech is going to struggle to score for some stretches, just like they did at Bramlage earlier this season, where I think they went 6 minutes or whatever it was without a field goal within the last 10 minutes of the game. So it's definitely an opportunity for K-State's defense to kind of get right on the road a little bit, kind of like Gabe Road after the loss at Kansas 2 weeks ago at this point, or was that was last week, actually. Kind of like the loss at Kansas last week, where K-State's defense has really struggled on the road in Big 12 games. And granted, they've played the best teams on the road in
Yeah.
Big 12 play, giving up over 100 to Texas, giving up a 90 plus, I believe it was, to Baylor on the road earlier this season, yet 95, and then giving up 82 to TCU, a team that's not a great shooting team on the road. Obviously, they struggled a little bit at Iowa State as well, giving up 80 to a team that struggles offensively. And then they give up 90 to KU at Allen Fieldhouse. So the defense needs to be better on the road, but now you're getting to play some of the teams on the road in the Big 12 that struggle a little bit more, like Texas Tech, like Oklahoma. You then get to play on the road at Oklahoma State, another team that struggles. And then you get to go to West Virginia, a team that's actually pretty good offensively. I know the stereotype is press Virginia. They don't do that anymore. If you watch them, their defense is actually.
Although they did do a little bit of it to Iowa State on Wednesday, and it frustrated.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying.
But like, yes, they're not like they used to be anymore. Yes.
But where I'm going with it's like West Virginia's offense is actually ahead of their defense in a lot of categories this year. So it's a game that K-State does need to win on Saturday against an inferior opponent. While like a loss would be bad, it's a Q1 loss if you were to lose. So it's not going to kill your resume. It's definitely not a game that K-State wants to have on their resume in red.
Yeah, well, something that the games that K-State lost, their last 3 road losses in Big 12 play, TCU, KU, and Iowa State in that mix. A lot of turnovers for K-State and high turnovers from their main guys in those games, Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson. And that's what did it. Like, you can point to bad turnovers in all of those games that set their opponents up to either go on a run or make critical plays to win the game. So that's why I'm saying, like, and I think you're with me on this. Like, K-State, if they take care of the basketball and they're just solid in their post defense, they'll be fine, because they match up pretty well when teams have to run the game through their perimeter. They do a decent enough job there. They just have to be sturdy when it comes to not making bad passes and turning the ball over themselves. And that's why this is a huge game, kind of a get-right game for Noel and Johnson, because the two of them, although I thought they were better offensively from a scoring and shooting efficiency standpoint on Tuesday, they were still really bad in the turnover department. The two of them still combined for 12 of the 15 turnovers that K-State had. That cannot happen, especially for Keontae Johnson, when Keontae's not like a ball handler per se. You know, he's getting the ball in the post and he can move with it and he'll adjust, but he needs to do a better job of keeping track of it. So as long as K-State does that, they should be able to take care of Texas Tech. And I will throw in the caveat that if Tech goes out and they shoot like 50% from 3 and they're just, on fire and it's their day, then yes, K-State can lose that game. The likelihood of that happening seems pretty low. This is a game K-State should win and take care of.
Yeah, it's a game they need to win. All right, Mason, before we get out of here, I have a little trivia question for you.
Okay.
For this edition of Kansas State basketball, what player on the team do you think has the highest usage rate?
I would go with Keontae Johnson.
Wrong. Third highest.
Okay. Marquise Noel.
Wrong. Second highest.
Okay. Well, I guess is this just relative to when they're on the floor? Like,
that would be one's usage rate. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I will go with Desi Sills.
No.
Okay, so it's got to be Naquan.
This is actually one of the lower ones. Desi's at 16.4.
Oh, that kind of surprises me. But, I guess when you touch it for like 2 seconds, and you're just either cutting to the rim or turning it over. So who is it then? It's got to be Naquan then, right?
It is not Naquan Tomlin. He's close to average at 18%.
I am confused. I've got no guesses then. I've got no idea.
It is Nate Aubrey at 33%.
Okay, well that's okay. Great. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Fun fact about
Nate Aubrey, receiver of 5 stars on Tuesday night.
Exactly. Fun fact about Nate Aubrey: if you pull up his Bart Torvik page, the only area of his game that is not white or red, and those white is representative of average, red is representative of bad, below average. The only area of Nate Aubrey this season that is green is his usage rate.
There you go. Good stuff. Okay, that's good to know. Well, here I'll leave you with this a little bit of trivia. See if you're reading. Do you know who the most recent K-State Wildcat to win a Super Bowl is?
See, I saw you post this morning, but I didn't get a chance to read it yet. It's got to be someone on the Chiefs. Pringle.
Yeah, Byron Pringle is the last Wildcat to win a Super Bowl.
Look at me.
Will remain. He will remain in that spot because there are no K-Staters in this year's Super Bowl. So, not going to have the opportunity this year. Maybe next year we shall see.
Who's your Super Bowl pick, by the way?
The Chiefs.
Okay.
Yep. I think I'm going to do the the first half winner and then the game winner. And so I think I'm taking the Eagles to be up at halftime, but the Chiefs to win the game. I think that's my
What other
main
prop bets are you going to make?
I don't know. I haven't thought too hard about it. I am interested in maybe taking a peek, seeing what's there. I've been too focused on betting West Coast basketball the last couple nights, though. It started on Tuesday when LaFraud James screwed me, and
Sorry, you mispronounced lookout.
Yeah, he screwed me over. He decided, not only did he decide to take the rest of that game off after he scored 36, he took last night's game off too. And that pissed me off even more, even though I didn't have money on the Lakers or LeBron. But I was like, okay, come on, suit up, big guy. For those of you that don't know, I put it was a small wager down on LeBron James to score 40 points or more on Tuesday when he needed to set the record. And he scores 36 in less than three quarters. And I'm like, oh, he's got this easy. And then he barely plays the rest of the game and finishes with 38. I wanted to smack the man. That frustrated me. But last night was, it was a decent night. I took the Sun Devils. That worked out for me. And I also had, some other things working in my way. So, we'll see how it goes there. But the Super Bowl, I haven't really looked at a ton of others yet. And I don't know, I go through FanDuel. They don't have any of the crazy and zany prop bets on there. So
I feel like DraftKings has most of them.
Yeah, I think they've got a partnership of some kind. And let me tell you, I'm not signing up for another betting app or gambling company because I've already tried out 3 of them. One of them I use and the other one I sometimes use and the other one completely sucked. And I won money there, but I was like, this app sucks.
What three are they?
So FanDuel is the main one that I use. The only reason that I have the Barstool one is because they would post college basketball lines earlier than the others. And so before college basketball season started, I wanted to be able to have ample time to place my college basketball bets the first day of the season. So I had to get that. And then my brother, he was like, hey, if you sign up for
app, the one that you don't like because
no, their app is a little bit slow, but it's actually really nice for sorting college sports because it actually lets you sort games by conference affiliation. FanDuel, you just have to scroll through a giant ass list in order of when the tip time is and find the game. The one that sucks is BetMGM. BetMGM was just a horrendous product, even though I won my money on there from when I correctly predicted KU not only to cover against Indiana in that one game, I also in that same app took the Vikings to come back against the Colts in that game. That won me some money. And then my last bet in there before I cashed it all out was that Argentina would win the World Cup in penalty kicks. So
those are the only 3 bets you placed on BetMGM?
Yeah. So
those are 3 hilarious bets. 2 of those 3 are hilarious bets. The other one's not.
Yeah. So, they all came through, but the app sucks. And they were promising some payout or whatever, at the beginning, here, you get free bets or whatever. And that's why my brother texted me. I was at a family Christmas with my wife's family, and my brother's blowing up my phone. And he's like, hey, if you sign up here, you get this. I was like, okay, whatever. He's like, and then I'll get some. Okay. So I do it. It doesn't come. And then it's 2 weeks. It still hasn't come. And it's just the app sucks. It makes no sense. I was like, this is stupid, Matt. I'm sorry. I'm giving up on this trip or whatever.
So before we get out of here and continue with the betting theme and the conference realignment theme of this show, of the 8 schools that we know that are changing conferences prior to the 2024 season, so Texas, Oklahoma, UCLA, USC moving to the 2 mega conferences. UCF, Houston, BYU, and Cincinnati moving to the Big 12. Which of those 8 schools wins a conference title first?
Of the new schools that have realigned, okay. I am going to go with USC.
In what year?
So their first year is 2024.
Yeah. So like a B.
Yeah, I would like to be. I don't know. I will take USC in. I'll take USC in 2024. First year in the Big Ten.
Is Lincoln Riley going to learn how to coach defense?
It doesn't need to in the Big Ten.
Okay.
The Big Ten doesn't have any offense. That's the perfect league for him to be in.
Yeah,
they're going to be so confused,
though, and they've got a great offense.
Yeah, but they'll something will happen. It'll work out where the schedule's funky. He won't have to play Ohio State until whatever, and it'll be all right. So yeah, I'm going to say USC 2024, and then my next pick would be. That's a tough one. My next pick would probably. I don't know, because I like the 4 that are joining the Big 12. I could see a realm where in the next 6 years, any of them win the league. But
they're going to have an adjustment process.
But they have
a bigger adjustment process.
Yeah, there's going to have to be some things that work out, and there are going to have to be some leaps and bounds that are made because, like Houston could be the best out of those 4, but they've got the longest way to go out of them. UCF, I think they have the best coach of the 4 right now, and Gus Malzahn, and there's a lot to like about what they could do, but I'm not 100% convinced yet. And then Cincinnati, maybe they'll be solid, but I think they caught lightning in a bottle with Luke Fickell, and I'm not 100% sure that they're going to get back to that level of Cincinnati. And so I don't know. They will probably consistently be the second best team of the new 4 additions, but I can't ever predict that they are going to reach the greatest heights out of the new ones. And then BYU, I like Kalani Sitake, but I like him because he just kind of does whatever the hell he wants, and sometimes that's to the detriment of his team. I think he's the sole reason why they lose at least 3 games every year. A team that goes 7-5, 8-4, he is the sole reason why they lose at least 3 games every year because he will unnecessarily be aggressive. He's the Brandon Staley of college football. He makes some really dumb decisions. I like watching him and everything. I like watching BYU, but he makes some really dumb decisions that if they work in their favor, you go, man, I love this guy. That's great. That's awesome. Awesome that he did that. But then they don't work out half the time. You're like, oh, that was really freaking stupid. So there you go.
So if I was betting on this, and I am not a gambling man,
should be
USC. Well, get a sportsbook to sponsor the podcast, sponsor Ema Online, and I will. USC would maybe be my bet. But Lincoln Riley's defense scares the hell out of me. I think that and their offensive and defensive line play scares the hell out of me.
Yeah.
I think they could just get absolutely smoked in the trenches in the Big Ten by a lot of schools. I don't think UCLA is going to be very good in football in the Big Ten. So that leads me to the 2 new SEC members. And I don't particularly like what's going on at Oklahoma currently, even though they've recruited well. They were not very good this year. And it leads me to Texas, which, I don't really have a reason to believe that Texas is going to win the SEC. But I kind of believe in the trajectory of the program right now, given the success they've had recruiting the offensive and defensive lines. But I don't really believe that.
No, don't do it.
So I'm going to pick one of the new Big 12 schools.
Okay.
And I think I'm going to pick Houston because I think Houston's going to be very good in football in the Big 12. I don't know what year it's going to happen. I'll say by 2030.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that would be the trajectory that it would have to be for one of the new schools, I think, in the Big 12 to win it. Unless something happens where they get way better, way quicker than we think is possible. But I think for at least the first couple of years, it's going to be the schools that are holdovers in the Big 12 that win.
You really thought I was going to pick Texas, didn't you?
It wouldn't have surprised me. You've got some sick obsession with them that you think that they actually know what they're doing,
I
and
like bright and shiny toys.
and those of us that have seen it over the last decade plus, we just know that they're frauds and that they're not as good as they should be. And it's no fault than their own because they're a bunch of stuck up people that like to lose games that they should win, and that's what happens. They make bad hires that people think are great ones, and what you end up with is Tom Herman and Chris Beard, and what the likely outcome for Steve Sarkisian is going to be. So there you have
I
it.
was listening to our peers over at Orange Bloods last night. They did a live show after that stuff
Yeah.
became public. And someone in their chat asked a question along the lines of, would it be better for Texas to win the Big 12 in their last season, or would it be better for the Texas to win the SEC in their first season?
Shut the
I'm like,
hell up.
well, that's a stupid question. The
That's
answer
the
is
dumbest thing I've
obviously
ever
put the
heard.
SEC in their first
Yeah,
season.
all of your crap that has just gone down the last however many years where people dump on you for not doing anything in the Big 12, it does get erased if you show up day one and you say, I run this place, and you take the SEC. That's
Do you
just
remember when
that's
Mizzou went to the SEC championship in their first 2 years of the
Yes.
SEC? And people
Yes.
were like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Like that was a down-ish SEC East at that point. But that
It was
like,
it was not a down-ish. It was a down SEC East.
and Gary Pinkel was a great coach.
No,
but
Gary Pinkel, fine coach.
I remember that happening. I was like, wow.
Yeah,
'Cause
and
people
that
were
just
like,
goes to
Mizzou's gonna get
showcase,
smoked.
and that's what helps, like the argument that people have, where it's like, yeah, congrats, the SEC at the top, like cumulative talent and success, the SEC cannot be matched, but it is propped up and bolstered so much by like the top of the field that the bottom
Listen, you still got
two-thirds of the
Arkansas losing to
SEC,
Liberty, and you've got A&M losing to App State.
yeah, the bottom 2/3 of that league are pretty similar, if not worse than some other ones out there, but they get propped up by a lot. And Missouri playing in the SEC title game their first 2 years was a great example of that after not having won jack shit in the Big 12.
Well, and they'll never play for another SEC title either.
Not as it stands right now. No, they're going to need something real funky to happen with the schedule and the pod system or whatever they're going to end up doing. And they just decide one year the schedule making gods in the SEC say, you know what, Missouri, you get Vanderbilt
9 times.
Yeah, you get Mississippi State. We'll give you Arkansas.
Well, that's their protected rival.
Kentucky, South Carolina. There you go. And like even then, like we're giving those are games where you already start to go, I don't know if they can beat Kentucky or South Carolina or Arkansas or Mississippi State or Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt battled with them this year in Columbia. So you never,
I just think it would be
know.
I also listened to another thing last night, and it was someone else threw in the chat. It was this was funny. This actually made me laugh. At what point does Texas get upset in the SEC and leave? People were like, well, where are they
go join Live Golf?
Like, well, how about the Big Ten?
They're more likely to go join Live and team up with the Saudi Arabian government to start a college football conference. So
they're not leaving the SEC. No one leaves the SEC except Tulane. But
yeah, but hey, look at Tulane. They're doing just fine.
Fun fact: Tulane has more SEC titles than Texas.
That's very
just
true.
Saying.
What year is it that Texas finally has more SEC titles than Tulane?
Oh man, that's a good question.
How many does Tulane actually have? Do they have just
1,
2? Okay, so when is
2027? Duh.
We're gonna be here a while. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
I don't know.
Thank you, Alec Hook'em fan for life.
I don't know.
Whatever.
2050. Is that enough time?
You might need to go up more. I think I'll have grandkids by the time.
Well,
Texas
you're
wins
looking at the fact that, like, Nick Saban's going to retire here in the next decade, I would imagine.
I don't know. I think Nick Saban might live forever. So, all right. Well,
there is someone who would.
The last 15 minutes were not anything that you probably cared about, but maybe you had fun. We'll be back on Monday to talk K-State, Texas Tech, and any other wild stuff that pops up. I can't imagine we have anything crazier than K-State possibly losing an offensive coordinator or whatever else. So that'll do it for us. We are out. Be sure to follow along KansasState.Rivals.com over at EMA Online, where you can get news on Collin Klein, staying at K-State, stuff on conference realignment that Alec's going to be working on today, and plenty of coverage for K-State, Texas Tech basketball, because the Wildcats are still in the hunt for the Big 12 title race, and we'll see if we get any more clarity on what might play out this weekend. Texas is at home against West Virginia, so I wouldn't bank on the Pac being able to level with Texas this weekend, but it's still a big weekend nonetheless in the Big 12, especially since Baylor has a road trip to TCU, and Iowa State, coming off a loss, they're at home against a frisky Oklahoma State. So we'll see what takes place there. But that'll do it for us. Be sure to get signed up at EMA Online, subscribe to the YouTube and podcast feeds, and we'll talk to you again sometime soon.